All right, gang's all here. Welcome everyone to
Hey,
another
Chris.
exciting event. We are live. I'm Chris Clements with CISO Global, the company that believes that cybersecurity is a culture, not a product. Today, I've got some awesome folks with us. We've got our CTO, Jerry Dawkins. Say hey, Jerry. And also
Hey,
got
good to be here.
hey, and also got Michael Oglesby, our VP of Product Security. Today we'll be discussing how to secure remote workers and cloud access at the same time, how recent changes have made that an especially pressing need for organizations, and solutions like our exciting new Argo Edge offering. But before we begin, I want to let you know that we will be taking questions during this event, so please chime in the comments, and we'll respond at the end. So Michael, kick us off here. What's this new challenge that we've really been introduced in the last couple of years?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. And I don't even know if it's a new challenge. It's really just the sort of the historical direction that we've been going in for the last 10 years of this sort of cloud-based world we've been going. The global pandemic really basically accelerated our transition to the cloud in a major way, right? Before the cloud, we were mainly just looking at offloading, very specific apps to the cloud, maybe a few compute, maybe some pieces here and there. Companies might have been dabbling with maybe moving their email or DNS to the cloud. Suddenly, global pandemic hit, and it was no longer let's move one thing to the cloud. Let's move everything we have to the cloud immediately, right? Users were getting sent home, often with no security, no knowledge of how they're going to get back in, and companies really had to rapidly figure out how we're going to extend our security layer out there. And in most cases, they didn't figure it out. They just said, go home and we'll figure it out later. And that later is, well, basically now. And so we've been trying to figure out how are we going to secure, this new cloud-first digital world. And that, has sort of coalesced in the last few years with a new name. We love our acronyms in security, right? It's called SASE, Secure Access Service Edge. And it's really a new way of thinking about security overall, like how we're going to do visibility, how we're going to do access control, how we're going to do SOC services, and really taking a cloud-first approach. I can no longer just having all of your users try to backhaul them all the way in through an old VPN, back to some data center, back to your home office, try to do a bunch of security there, and then push them back out to the cloud, right? This ping pong effect is very inefficient and it no longer works anymore, right? Now we live in a world where users are out in the cloud, sometimes forever, right? You might have users who never come back to your home office, right? And they want to access your resources that are in the cloud, like your email, your apps and stuff. So it really makes no sense for a home user to VPN to a data center in Texas, maybe they're in Seattle, and then back out to Microsoft to get their email, back to your data center, back to their home. Like they should go from their home through the cloud, the power of the cloud, straight to their email and then back, right? That's the power of the cloud. The problem is we as security professionals have our tools and our visibility layers all in the data center, all at the home office. And we're like, wait a minute, how am I going to secure those two people talking to each other now? And so now we want to project our years of experience, our security tools, our visibility platform. We've got to project that out of our little bubble out into the cloud as well, so that we can protect our users who are accessing the cloud in real time.
Yeah, that old stack and a rack approach. I mean, it made a lot of sense when everyone was on the same network, right? But you're exactly right. Having to force everyone to the backhaul, figure out the routing, bandwidth, latency. Yeah, it's just an absolute nightmare. Jerry, another thing that occurs to me though is like when you have users move out to remote work, oftentimes you lose control over the pathway, their network connection that they're using. And it seems to me that would also open it up for them to access just anything they want on the internet, right? So unapproved cloud services, even software as a service. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, there was kind of a classic, the classic architecture was always kind of a virtual private network. Most everybody had VPNs, and it's let's funnel all that traffic, kind of like what Michael was saying, through a corporate network where we have all of our security tools and our stack of doing our analysis, which worked fine if you've got a small amount of users. But whenever you get a large amount of users, That's a lot of VPN connections. Now it's no longer functional, and it's extremely inefficient. And so you have to rethink how to do that. I think one thing that that was interesting to me is, and I think Michael even said it. He made a comment. He's like, these aren't new problems, and I would agree. It's just that we have new ways of stating the problem. And one of those new ways of stating the problem is something that we hear a lot about, and it's zero trust. You know, zero trust is more of an architecture, and I think fundamentally that's the way that people need to kind of approach this. Is like, it's just a slightly different architecture. And when I think of zero trust, you know what I think of? Like, I'm kind of old school. I'm thinking of like the classic cybersecurity principles, and one of those is least privilege. And least privilege is you don't let anybody do anything except for those things that they have to do. And so when you think about least privilege, zero trust, they're logically equivalent, and it's how do you enable that? And I think that's one of the fun parts from my standpoint of like, you know, especially at like CISO Global, you know, the teams that we have, like this is the bringing together of those teams into this new architecture, because it requires thought at multiple levels. And then I think the part that's exciting for me is if you look at the classical model of the architecture model, you know, organizations were always like they were limited in logs. How am I going to get the logs? How am I going to respond? Like how do I SOAR was kind of coming around, like security, orchestration, automation, response. You know, and we certainly did. And this is like that next generation of SOAR. So before it was like, how do we tie up all these different pieces, to now we have a platform that has all the pieces together. So now we can make really actionable you know, changes. We can have more actionable threat intelligence. So there's something that I like to say is like, how can we be more threat informed? You know, how can we take action on this? So to your point, Chris, it's like you have these remote workers and you want to protect them. And so, yes, you need kind of a zero trust methodology, but you have to protect them. And part of them protecting them is leveraging those capabilities that you've created in your cybersecurity platform and that threat intelligence. And how do you apply that? You know, and how do you apply it if you're not having everybody VPN? You know, and the answer is through this architecture. The answer is through you know, Argo Edge. Like that's how you accomplish protecting these remote workers. And I also want to make sure that we're not just thinking. I'm always a big fan of like you know, what's the use case? What's the case study? Because sometimes when you look up SASE, you're like, oh, it's a combination of, you know, SD-WANs and, you know, IDSs, IPSs, firewalls, and, you know, and you CASB, and you start throwing around acronyms and start putting all these. But at the end of the day, it's really, what capabilities are you gaining? You know, what capabilities? What's kind of the use case of this? And I think that's the part that's fun to me. You know, it's certainly some of the clients that we've talked to that I'm excited about are, you know, certainly it's the remote workers and access to remote to, you know, your different SaaS platforms, but it's also privileged access management. You know, it's allowing you to create separation and segmentation. So in the manufacturing space, deal with regulations. You know, healthcare. I'm excited about the health tech space. You know, I think there's tremendous opportunities in that space.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, that's I love just the foundation of the idea, because it centralizes all that all of that good stuff that we traditionally had in the data center. And you know, it's like being able to, you know, not only protect your users but protect you from your users, right? So you know, there was the headlines just recently about data breaches due to users using ChatGPT unauthorized for work stuff. So being able to track that sort of usage as well, that's another huge, I think, component of that. And it also makes me think of you know, the other recent breaches that we've saw with like with MGM and Microsoft. You know, without digressing too much into that, what are you guys' thoughts on those?
Yeah, I mean, those are just, you know, classic examples of breaches extending into the cloud layer, right? And both Microsoft and MGM, the threat actors both gained essentially full global administrative privileges to the cloud layer. And in both cases, both organizations didn't have good incident response playbooks. They didn't know how to project their security stack into those cloud environments. We were laughing at the MGM one this morning, like the threat actors were actually taunting the MGM defenders because they were locking themselves out. They didn't know how to kick people out of their cloud environment. And they ended up deploying ransomware all over, and just sort of like laughed at the administrators, like, hey, well, like we're in here, you guys can't even kick us out. You don't even know how to kick us out. And they called them ill prepared in a cloud first world, stuff like that. So, the cloud has tremendous benefits to user experience, to bandwidth, to cost savings, but it's also a target rich environment for attackers. They know that many of these companies are ill prepared to be able to respond to the cloud.
Yeah, and it's a totally separate architecture. It's different tool sets, even though there's a lot of similarities between the tool sets. But I think there's a lot of potential in terms of endpoint monitoring or user behavior analysis. There's things that you can do in kind of a cloud first kind of model that allows you to identify indicators of compromise, IOCs, and have more actionable threat intelligence and take action on things. But in order to do that, you need to be in that flow. You need to be in that piece, which that's essentially what SASE allows you to do. It lets you get in the flow. It lets you control that data. And in order to accomplish that, it's a different architecture. And so as an organization, you certainly need to start thinking about, this kind of a cloud first kind of, movement. You can't neglect your classical architecture, but now it's increasing the challenge. We struggled before, and now you just doubled it up and you've created a whole new set of tools, and you have to wire up a whole new set of tools. And I think that's one of the challenges that organizations face. I mean, heck, we were still trying to wire up our classical infrastructure. Now you're throwing some totally new architecture at us. So now we got to wire up some all new set of tools and technologies and get them all working and functioning together. So these are, I don't want to underestimate, these are definitely hard problems to solve, and they're real challenges that organizations face.
Yeah, so we've used a lot of terms here. It seems like in cybersecurity specifically, we love our TLAs and FLAs, 3 and 4 letter acronyms. Which an FLA is actually a TLA, which is kind of a paradox, or maybe not. I don't know. Anyway, so one that we've used repeatedly is SASE. So Michael, can you just tell me, what is a SASE, and what are the typical components of a solution like that? And how does that look in practice for an organization to implement something like that?
There's a couple of core components to SASE. So really, we're thinking about a cloud first sort of dynamic approach to security, right? So traditionally, developers and IT people have sort of enjoyed this dynamic nature of the cloud, where they can just spin up as many servers as they want to, respond to increased workloads by just spinning up a new web server, 3 new web servers. The demand hits, and then you sort of spin it down. Where in security world, we've like, well, here's my SIM. It's static. I got to go buy more licenses. It can't scale up or down. It's deployed in this one network here. So we're sort of getting all of these benefits of the dynamic nature of the cloud within our security stack. There's about 4 sort of key components that you can kind of tie together in this model, this new view. You've got ZTNA, or zero trust architecture, where the previous old school was security is all about where you are on the network. It's about VLANs, right? The VLANs control access between the different points, and it's a very much network-centric approach to security. And so when you have a remote user, how do you get them onto your VLAN to do your access control? Well, you got to do a clunky VPN, drop them on a VLAN, and suddenly that's how you're accessing that. In a zero trust model, that user is never going to come back to your VLAN. In fact, VLANs aren't even in the picture anymore, right? We're no longer applying access controls at a network ACL device layer. We're applying it to the user level, to the user's devices, and with a strong tie into their identity, because they're never actually going to come back to your network, right? You got to think in this set of these devices, I'll never see them again, right? So if your security is reliant on things coming back to your network to get patched or to have group policies be applied, and in cloud-first worlds, that'll never happen. It's all got to be projected in the cloud. So you need your user access control, your device control in the cloud. You need some sort of network visibility, so some sort of secure web gateway to be able to see where your users are going, both on the public internet and on your private internet apps. And the benefit of that is now you get an extra layer of visibility that you normally wouldn't get, because normally users would go straight to the internet to access public cloud apps. Now you can also get that visibility. We call that CASB, or Cloud Access Security Broker. Now you can see where your users are going on the public internet, no matter where they are. Like, are they using Box? Are they using Dropbox? Are they using services that might have been blind, that your traditional network might have been blind to? So to make all of this sort of happen, right, your users are now all over the place. They're not coming back in. We still need that networking layer to help, coordinate all of this. And so now we can kind of be much more integrated with the IT team and the networking team and use their SD-WAN infrastructure, right? The security team doesn't have to rebuild their own VPN concentrators and their own firewall ACLs and try to play nice with the networking team, right? Those are now one and the same together, right? Using the SD-WAN layers and cloud interconnect layers, and then putting the security at those boundary points. So rather than it being the networking team and the security team and the cloud team, we're bringing them all together into sort of one bucket that we call SASE now. And all three of these teams are now working together in a holistic framework, rather than three separate people with their own three separate silos and three separate tool sets, all looking at each other.
Yeah. So something I always say is, security is a team sport, and I think that's the interesting part to me from this architecture. It's identity access management, it's device management, it's network, it's application workload, and it's data. So all those key components have always been items that a security team and a NOC and a SOC, it's always been something they've had to deal with. It's just that the cloud environments and remote workers and this disparate systems that we're using now has just exacerbated the problem of being able to implement cybersecurity tools. So this allows us to kind of centralize and make it easier for us to ultimately execute what it is that we do, and that's the security protection. But all those pieces, like I said before, I mean, you got to tie them together. But yeah, Michael's exactly right. It's like the combination of these teams coming together.
Yeah, and it occurs to me this also solves a problem that we've had for quite some time with before work from home was at the volume that it is, with access from insecure locations. So if you're in, say, a coffee shop with open Wi-Fi or a hotel Wi-Fi network, that's long been a concern for attacks to go through there. And I mean, connectivity's gotten better since we've had the wall of sheep at, at the big conferences, right, where we're just pulling cookies out of clear text off Wi-Fi. But it seems like a solution like this would be just kind of a blanket kind of a coverage, because when everyone's on a home network, whose responsibility is that network, right? After the Lapsus breaches last year, I mean, one of my favorite terms is advanced persistent teenager, especially if they're bored at home, seeing what they can do on the network.
Like
and, that could put sensitive, organization information at risk. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, the couple of thoughts that just come to mind, and I do like your advanced persistent teenager. Was that what it was? I like that. I've got a new one, so that's a new threat in my household. But I think the one point that I want to stress is, certainly the remote workers are and you said coffee shop, and yes. But I think this architecture is a great architecture that can apply to a whole lot of things, internal systems, and you earlier you said MGM, and people, I think it was Lindsay on our team who asked me kind of what my thoughts were on the MGM kind of breach, and I made a comment to her. I was like, the part that was most shocking to me is the extent of compromise, the lateral movement that they were able to do. I mean, they got the casino floor, they got the reservation system, they got the key rooms, they got the ATM network, they got a whole lot of things, and that tells me, like, segmentation in the SCADA world, or the industrial control system world, or the whatever you want to call it. It's they always use the term air gap. Are these network air gapped? And then as cybersecurity teams, as we started coming in, we realized there wasn't as much air gap as what they had thought, because technology enabled it. So now you have an executive that wants to see a dashboard, and they want to make real time, and they want to interface, which is awesome. So we're being more efficient and more effective with our data, but that brings risk. And so what used to be air gapped is no longer air gapped. And so when you think about new modern companies in today's world, you're moving to that next layer. You are no longer controlled by this, like, this building and these walls and these computers and our servers, and the data only resides here, and we can lock this down. Now you've matured, which is great, because now your workforce is more efficient, they're more effective, but it comes at a risk, and that's what you have to address.
So, Jerry, let's follow up on that. So, we've kind of talked in general terms about the solution to this type of issue that we're facing with work from home and the move to the cloud. Tell me a little bit about Argo Edge.
Yeah, I mean, Argo Edge is essentially everything that we've been talking about. Like, from my standpoint, it's the combination of the great team members that we have at CISO Global that have come in to help engineer and put all the pieces together. And then my main thing is, how do you make it actionable threat intelligence? Like, how do you actually protect this stuff? How can you do, artificial intelligence, machine learning? I know those are kind of buzzwords, but how can you be more active in response now that you've got a combined group? So there's a couple of pieces. One, it's how do you build this infrastructure? What is the infrastructure comprised of? What are the tool sets? How do you get it wired up? How do you get everything working? And then how can you respond? And how can you respond in each of those areas that I just described? It's identity access management. It's at the device level. It's at the network level. It's at the application layer. It's at the data layer. So these are complex issues. And how can you respond? Well, you have to stay apprised of what are the latest threats and trends. Like, how are the attackers executing, and how can you best respond, and how can you best protect the user? So the part that I love about Argo Edge is it's exactly what we've been building here at CISO Global. It's the combination of it's a culture, not a product. It's about teamwork.
Yeah, that's great. Michael, what's your take on Argo Edge?
Yeah.
Anything that you'd say that customers need to be asking themselves about solutions like this, or advantages you can have from different providers?
Yeah, I mean, this is really an opportunity to sort of reevaluate the type of features and capability sets that you're going to get from providers who know what they're doing in the space, right? The traditional model has always been like, if you were to come to CISO Global, 4 years ago, to buy our SOC services as an example, one of our questions would be, how many places do I have to ship my boxes to, right? You've got to get all of your users into these locations, and then we price it based on those type of locations, right? With Argo Edge, it's no longer about the number of locations. It's like, how many users and where are they? Like our layer is going to be up in the cloud, and you can send your users straight to there. We no longer kind of have to be pigeonholed into data center by data center approach.
Yeah.
But what's so awesome now is that we as the security team can now use all of this cool cloud-based stuff that all the rest of IT has been getting to play with for years now. So as a great example, like Microsoft Sentinel, which is a cloud-based centric SIEM, you can run your own security-based machine-level AI models inside their SIEM natively. It ties in with the Azure AI and ML data store. That's really hard to do if you're just on a traditional on-prem antivirus, on your network, right? We can't stand up custom AI environments in every single one of our cloud and every single one of our on-prem traditional environments. But in the cloud, we can roll out brand new AI security models that can globally protect the whole ecosystem in literal minutes now. Like that would have taken a huge effort in the old traditional model, but now our ability to rapidly deploy threat intelligence is just through the roof. So if you're really evaluating these types of vendors, you got to kind of look like, are you just a traditional model in the cloud, or are you an organization who's really embracing that cloud-based and have the threat intel, have the experience, have the data behind it to be able to actually make use of all of the cool cloud features and not just be an on-prem traditional SOC in the cloud, right? That kind of difference kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And I love what you said, because I hadn't thought about it until you said it, that the cybersecurity guys are finally getting to get the excitement of the cloud, right? I mean, for years it's been the developers, and it's been the website operators, and getting all this cool stuff that's in the cloud, and now it's our turn. So that's really really exciting.
We'll let you start using ChatGPT, Chris.
Oh, you're too kind. Yeah, and that's a great point about the advantages that you can only get from a cloud solution like this. That ML and AI specifically. I mean, you take a look at the very expensive specialized hardware that the organizations use. Being able to use that on a more fractional basis from a cloud provider is just huge, right? Because that opens up so many new capabilities that otherwise it'd be infeasible to try to do it yourself on premise. Well, cool. So I got about 2 minutes left on our clock here. So guys, any parting comments, and then we'll open up for questions.
No, I'm good with questions.
Oh yeah. What do we got?
All right.
Hit us up.
Let's see. Any questions in the chat? I don't know. I haven't been paying too much attention. Hang on.
Yeah, I got something about implementing comprehensive endpoint monitoring and control solutions. Identify user behavior and control their activities using different security policies. Yes, I think one of the benefits to if you were to talk about a classic SOC, you talk about SIM, you talk about SOAR, and you're creating like triggers. So you're looking for certain activities and you're trying to take action on them. And you're only limited, and I think this is the key thing. You're limited based on the data that you're collecting, the logs. Well, one of the challenges in any of those systems is like everybody always restricts the number of feeds that are coming in because there's too many, or it's expensive, and so you're limiting yourself and your ability to respond. And I think that's one thing that I think is interesting about Argo Edge and this new architecture model is all the features are together. So there's nothing that you have to, you're still coordinating a bunch of the log data together, but your access to that information is there. And so you can be more actionable. You can do things that you couldn't do in a classical SOC architecture without having an abundance of tool sets. So I think things like behavior analysis and applying policies at the data level, at the user level, these are things that we've thought about, that we've wanted to do, but we probably didn't have the visibility in the classical SOC sense. And now we do, because of what the cloud is and the level of access that the vendors are giving us to work with them. So and Michael said it earlier, it's the playbooks. It's like Microsoft knows that they can't solve all the world's problems, so they're making it available to leverage other expertise, which I think is great.
Cool. Thank you for that. I don't think we've got any additional questions, and we are at time now. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks everyone for joining the event today. Have a good one.
Good stuff. Thank you.